This is chapter 4 of Dr. Reed's book. This one is Use, Gratify, and Repeat. Basically begins with saying how the gratification theory can be used to describe smartphone usage. And he basically put two categories. All smartphone usage can be social or process. Social has to do with social media usage, and process is non-social media uses. There's four categories of smartphone uses. Smartphone gratification processes. Cognitive, hendoic, integrative, and social interface. The cognitive gratification comes from seeking and finding information, while the hendic, I can't even say it right, comes from entertainment. Integration and social both have, social while integrative is a little bit more personal. Oftentimes we don't use phones for what they're intended for when we pull them out of our pockets. And there are two types of reasons for that, the endogenous and exo. Endogenous are like impulses and stuff that we have internally, while exo is the external parts. Like getting a notification on your phone, which will continuously make you want to use it. We are impulsive. That was a big point mentioned. And then there was introduced delayed gratification. This is something we talked about in class with not this part yet. Delayed gratification is getting a response later than rather instant. And within this delayed gratification, they basically said that delay and desirability are interconnected. So the more desirable a situation is, the more gratification you're going to receive for waiting from it. Then they start to talk about the slow companies and everything, and slowness and the effect of speed on technology. So slowness obviously being a new modern idea, as we recognize that all these fast things aren't necessarily good for us as a human race. There's a big quote that came out of that, which was, with modernization comes speed. And I feel like it'd be very true. Then there was a bunch of promises in the text about tech in 2023. Obviously, I believe this book was written in 2018. They're talking about having planes that can go Mach 2.2, underground pod transport. It was a bunch of stuff, which I think in concept is insane, but still has not come to light. Then he goes into talking about the how speed has affected the shopping industry, particularly Amazon. Also mentioning the drone system that they were making and are still making now, but how most of the world's sales, like 4% or 5% of the entire equity in the United States, comes from Amazon. And that's like shopping spent money, not just like money being made. But they also wrote about how the human mind gives up on something after enough time, and that's just because as a society we've trained our brains to feel that way. Mentioning a study where he had about, I think, 2,000 participants, could be 200, somewhere in between them, where they all took a survey, and they found that if the page didn't load in 3 seconds or faster, 53% of the people just closed out of it altogether. Now back into that slow everything. Companies are doing the opposite. They don't really want this to continue, and it did continue up until today. And we could see a lot of those effects in today's world. But there were some notable ones: Slow TV out of Norway, Slow Shopping, Slow Professor. And just a bunch of these things that slow down to stop us from this accelerated point, and have us live in that moment a little bit more and have that gratification from waiting instead of the instant gratification, which isn't even worth it. There was a quote used in tangent with imagination and waiting already. This waiting is a foreplay for the mind. Later on, they say waiting was a key point in imagination. It's necessary in human life. But for us, no matter how much we try to accelerate this process, waiting is always going to be a factor of human nature, and that was provided in the text as well. The next thing that they kind of went over is BAS, which was Behavioral Activation System. The more you scored higher on this system, the more dependent you were on your phone, and the less dependent you were on your phone. Now, he wrote of a concept, smartphone schedule, which in his eyes was like he opens at this time of the day, he opens an app at this time of the day, he uses this at this time of the day, and this. It's a schedule for your use throughout the day. And everybody has one, whether we are conscious of it or not. Another big point that was brought up was how we use smartphones to avoid boredom. In almost every age group, especially in 18-year-olds, or 18, 19, we over 50% as an average use it to avoid boredom. Even I do, I know you do, everybody does. Another crazy thing that read in the text that really stuck with me is how smartphone usage affects us mentally. So we're not happy using social media, but it kind of has an inverse effect because the entirety of the more people use those apps, like it's some of the most downloaded and most used apps in the world, even though they are correlated to less happy functions and less happy things. The next part, moving on, is how tech companies want to maximize your engagement time and your interaction between you and the app. And there was I'd say almost like a prototype of an app that was released, the Skinner AI, which was meant to basically say the more features, especially including artificial intelligence, the more productivity you will have and the more people will use your app. And that did not go well with media. And it really messed up their entire thing. They had to rebrand. A couple points. First being that social media plays off of human psychology, intentionally, of course. They make the apps addictive in the ways they know they can, just to keep people using, to keep making money, and that will never change. To add to that, the features they use to make this so addictive included a bunch of things. The little dot bubbles on messaging, autoplay on YouTube and Instagram, and mobile notifications, just sending out push notifications. I've talked about that before. There also was a correlation between the blinking dots on iMessage and anxiety raised, as it is a basically human to computer to human interaction. And a place where it doesn't need to be, but adds a little bit more tension. Now, a point they made is technology is made in a way that makes you want to favor the technological world rather than the own physical world. And from a sentence like that, you would obviously think, is this going to be regulated? And a point the book made was more of a question: should they be regulated in the same way that alcohol and tobacco companies are, as they know that both of those can destroy somebody's life, yet still sell it anyways, and they have to put label warnings and everything on that. And there was a point made that this blame doesn't necessarily fall entirely on the tech producers or the individual, yet a mix of both. So they mentioned companies demanding and the population demanding healthier options for these companies because they know it's wrong. And one of those would be Facebook's changing its rules back in 2017, where they decided to take like a 25% cut on ads and everything like that and decided to instead make it more family and personal oriented. Now, the problem with that is there's a reason why they're doing it, and we don't necessarily know, but they're not going to do something out of the good of their hearts intentionally without having some sort of profit involved. Now, the biggest, and it took about 8 pages of reading, was the fake news situation and how social media can be a medium for that fake news. And one of the pivotal points they used for fake news in American history was during Roosevelt's presidency. They're trying to say that black people were going to have an uprise, especially in the South. It was being produced everywhere, and that Roosevelt's wife was leading this, and there's this big thing, and in the end, it did mess with the presidential campaign. Speaking of presidents, the biggest example used was Donald Trump through Twitter, and how strong of a medium that is. Whether the news was fake or not, whatever he was putting out there still had an impact on American people, and it really plants a seed of doubt in the mind of somebody, especially going all willy-nilly at telling everybody that news is fake no matter what the source is coming from because they don't agree with it. Now, compared to him, there was John F. Kennedy, who liked press and went out of his way to say that to the American people, that whether that press was against him, for him, something he disliked or liked, either way, it was necessary and extremely crucial in American culture, and especially in the presidential campaigns, to have. Now, there was a part of it talking about where people get their news from, obviously opposed to 15, 20 years ago. At the time, I think they said like 63% of people get their news from the internet. It's definitely about 94% in today's society. They also wrote how that system of only short bits of knowledge make it very easy to manipulate and make fake news, as our attention span on news is fairly short and the amount of information we get is very sparse. Now, they also wrote about the dangers of having this personalized news source, as filtration and stuff that you only want to hear is only going to come to you rather than the true information and everything that needs to be heard. Next, they moved into, near the end, how everybody with a smartphone can add to news, bringing up many people getting shot, police brutality, a man drowning, many things that did and can influence news and be an outlet of its own news. Pretty much at the end, they're talking about how that is going to affect modern news, as most of these things are being uploaded to social media, and there is no real regulation on that, just some basic small rules. And that kind of ends it up until they talk about how this new media also violates the basic rules of newsmaking, particularly the respecting the fallen, or respecting the people who are afflicted by it. Obviously, posting a video of somebody getting shot on the internet is not going to be a good thing. Or at least it's a good thing for a social movement, less a good thing for the family that has to repeatedly see it. And yeah, that's pretty much it.